It's Jeremy here on Metal Music Meltdown, back with another video. Whatever today, guys, is something a little bit different. As you can see from the thumbnail, I'm going to be doing my top 10 hard rock slash metal guitarists of all time. Taking my eyes, this isn't a definitive list in any way. This is purely subjective. And these are all the guitarists that had the biggest impact on me, or were on some of my favorite albums, or in my opinion, lifted a band's quality up quite a bit on the albums they were on. So there's going to be a lot of guitarists and some really big ones that didn't quite make my list, but it is what it is. And I'll kind of give some quick honorable mentions off the top of my head before I give my number one. So number 10, I went with John Sykes. Really good guitarist out of England. He was on some of my favorite albums back in the day. He was on Tigers of Pantang, Spellbound, Crazy Nights, and The Cage. Love Spellbound. Really good guitar work on that one. Really good shredding stuff. And he was also in Thin Lizzy briefly on my favorite Thin Lizzy album, Thunder and Lightning, the last album they did. Definitely their heaviest album. And Sykes definitely had a big part of that, bringing more metal to the band and making them more heavier. Always been my favorite Lizzy album. And he was also in the two biggest Whitesnake albums as well, Slide It In and the self-titled 1987. Again, being a part of two iconic albums like that. And the debut Blue Murder album was really killer as well. His guitar playing across the board has just been stellar. He kind of vanished off the face of the earth, so I hope he put something out eventually. I don't know what the last project he did was. It's been like probably 20 years. But I heard he had a solo record out, but he just hasn't put it out. I'm not sure what's going on. But yeah, number 10, I have John Sykes, great guitarist. Number 9, might be surprised that I have him this low on my list, but I have Michael Shanker. Great German guitarist. He's been around for quite a while too. He was on the debut Scorpions album, Lonesome Crow. I think he was only like 15 when he was on that album. He was already a phenom and like a prodigy. He was on a bunch of UFO albums and tour, including Force It, Lights Out, Obsessions, the live album Strangers in the Night. Some of the best UFO albums as well. And then he had his Michael Shanker group. We had a ton of really good albums. Assault Attack is a killer album. And yeah, he's just on some of my favorite works, and his solo career is really good. He's been a part of a lot of projects. I just wish he stayed in one place a little bit longer. But yeah, killer guitarist. Number 8, I have Dimebag Darrell. Of course, known for being with Pantera. Rest in peace, Dime. He did die at the age of 38 when he was killed. Really good guitarist. I was never a huge Pantera fan, but I always loved Dime's playing. Really groove laden, and just he would always write these really infectious grooves and just play them through the whole song. Really headbanging stuff. He was energetic on stage. Unfortunately, never got to see him play live, but always been one of my favorite guitarists. Love his sound, and even on the early power metal albums he was on with Pantera, his shredding and guitar solos are insane. Really good player. At number 7, I went with Jimmy Page. This is kind of a no-brainer. Of course, known for Led Zeppelin, all his work on Led Zeppelin. I don't really need to say much on that. Riff master, wrote some of the best riffs of all time. Stairway to Heaven, come on, Kashmir, all the work of Led Zeppelin. It's just a masterpiece discography. And of course, Page had a big part to do with that. At number 6, I went with Brian May of Queen, of course. Queen's always been my favorite non-metal band, my favorite hard rock band of all time. And I love Brian May's tone. He'd put together his own guitars, he built his own guitars and kind of created his own sound that way, which is really cool. And he still has this little red electric guitar he built back with his dad back when he was a kid. And he still plays it on stage today, just because he can't replicate the sound that it creates, and it's just a killer guitar tone. It's like a fly buzzing around. And yeah, great player. Love his sound on Queen. Love his solos. Sonically, he sounds like nobody else. Just really good player. Love his stuff. At number 5, I went with the mighty Randy Rhoads. Rest in peace. Of course, he was on the first couple Ozzy albums. He was in Quiet Riot early on. And but Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman were probably the two albums that I remember him the most being on. And in Diary of the Madman, the title track kind of really showcased his abilities. He was more of a neoclassical player, really well trained, really good player. Like he died way too young, and I would have loved to see what he would have done of a long career. He was like a phenom and just a crazy good guitarist, and so much talent, and died way too young. Number 4, another kind of no-brainer, Eddie Van Halen. Of course, he died kind of recently in 2020. Also, obviously from Van Halen, everybody knows. But he changed the game in terms of guitar playing. When Eddie came around, it just changed the whole landscape of metal and hard rock. After he came out, everyone was chasing his tone, trying to duplicate what he did, and nobody sounded like Eddie. He made famous the tapping, style of playing, crazy guitar solos, and just energetic on stage, jumping on the stage and hitting the stack of receivers or whatever, and then flowing back and forth. He's a legend. Like, I don't really need to say much more. He's Eddie Van Halen, obviously one of the greatest of all time. Number 3, another one, Jimi Hendrix. So ahead of his time at the time. Only put out 3 albums, unfortunately. He died very young as well, age 27. The 3 stored albums he did put out are 3 of my favorite hard rock albums of all time. And he just had a cool sound, really raw playing, and a left-handed player as well, which is really cool. But just watching him on stage and those old footage from like Woodstock and stuff, he was so ahead of his time and just so like influential and experimental and just a crazy player, and he made it look effortless. And another guy who died way too young. I would have loved to see what he would have done if he'd lived longer. Number 2, I would have Tony Iommi. Of course, Black Sabbath, everybody knows. This is the master of metal. He wrote every metallic riff known to man. Ever since Tony's been out, people have just been kind of duplicating his riffs, speeding them up, playing them backwards, changing it a little bit. But he in my opinion, invented every metal riff ever made. Like, he's the shit. And a big part of Black Sabbath sound, the creator of metal, the creator of doom metal sound, he's huge. And he had to make the top part of my list. Not quite number 1, but number 2. Quick honorable mentions before I name my number 1. Some obvious ones I kind of left out. Eric Clapton was one I didn't make my list. Jeff Beck was another one I was really cringing leaving off. George Harrison of the Beatles was a big one. Steve Vai was another one I had to leave off. King, of course, but I kind of try to stick more to rock and metal, not bluesy stuff as much. But yeah, just some really good players out that didn't quite make my list, unfortunately. But number 1, I went with Richie Blackmore. He's always been my favorite guitarist. Love his stuff in Rainbow, and of course Deep Purple. And he's just been in everything. Like, Rainbow Rising is my favorite album of all time. He's on that, of course. He's in rock, like he's on that Mark III Deep Purple era. He's just a master. I don't really like his personality as much. I heard he's kind of hard to work with and kind of egotistical, like I'm sure a lot of guitarists are. But his playing is undeniable. Some of the coolest riffs and solos I've ever heard. He uses a lot of Middle Eastern scales in his work as well. But yeah, always been my favorite guitarist. Love his tone, love his playing. Always the best. So let me know down below, guys, what your top 10 guitarists would be, or top 5 or whatever. And I'm sure there's a ton of guys I left out, but for me, these are the ones that kind of stick out the most. So thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more great content. Keep it metal.